More than 3,000 women, over 100 Ferraris, 2 Falcon 900 private jets, a 55-meter yacht, 7 castles, almost 100 villas, hundreds of millions of dollars, all gone. 4 years of imprisonment for my heroin addiction and another 2 years for fraud. My name is Jean Pierre Van Rossem, and this is my story. How I made almost $1 billion illegally and almost $1 billion legally. But first things first, my story starts in Bruges. The year is 1953. Jean-Pierre is 8 years old at the time, and he grew up in Belgium with his parents Jean and Germaine, together with his 1-year-old younger brother, Paul, which happened to be his best friend. Life was mundane. Jean-Pierre always had a mind of his own and always got into trouble. He was even a rebel as a little kid. So one day, the school of Jean-Pierre was closed. So his little brother Paul asked him to come to kindergarten with him. Jean-Pierre agreed and spent the day with Paul in kindergarten. School closed 15 minutes early, and the teacher told the kids to stay in school as she had to go. After all other kids were picked up, Jean-Pierre and Paul were left all alone. They decided to go play at a construction site right across the school. They decided to race each other. Because Paul was smaller and younger, he got a head start. Paul ran as hard as he could. He raised his arms in the air like a champion, but then calamity struck. Paul ran under a truck. He was clammed between the wheels. Paul called out for Jean-Pierre. "Jean-Pierre, my tummy hurts." But I won. Jean-Pierre did not know what to do, so he ran as fast as he could back home to get his mother. As they returned to the scene, the truck driver backed up over Paul in an attempt to free him. Jean-Pierre called out, "Paul, say something, are you okay?" But Paul did not respond. Color left Paul's face. 3 days later, his father came back from the hospital with the sad news that Paul has passed on. At that moment, Jean-Pierre made a promise to himself. He swore he never wanted a new friend. He claims he never did. He started to read Karl Marx and became a huge fan. During his first year studying economics, he played cards for money while skipping classes. In his final year, he started working in a paper factory to earn some money, and he moved to Ghent. He graduated at the age of 23 and won first prize of an international scholarship with his thesis The Velocity of Money. With the money that he won, he bought a small sports car, a Honda S800. At that time, he started working at a bank, but he soon noticed several people scamming their bosses. Jean-Pierre told himself, why should he not get a piece of the action? Within 3 months, he already earned 12,500 euros on the side. At the bank, a lot of customers came asking for investing advice. But at that time, he didn't know any investing system. He would need to study 2 years of econometry for that, which only was taught in Rotterdam or Philadelphia. With econometric models, you can predict the future evolution of macroeconomic numbers. For example, in economic growth, inflation, interests, unemployment rates, etc. Jean-Pierre didn't like Rotterdam, but he liked the sound of Philadelphia. Furthermore, the Nobel Prize winner Lawrence Klein made a first econometric model with over 100 equations in Philly. The only problem was that he needed to save 1 million Belgian francs to pay for his studies over there. With his short temper and his own mind, he loses his next 2 jobs pretty fast.
Het soort economie van hoe maak ik mijn baas rijker, daar heb ik als ex-marxist een gloeiende hekel aan.
So he started his own tutoring classes. His slogan, if you don't pass, you get your money back. And it worked like a charm. He had over 20 students and sold theses to rich kids. But he did not earn hardly enough money to go to the States. In 1968, he got mixed up into the Parisian student revolt. On his way to the Paris riots, he spotted a Rolls Royce that broke down at the side of the road. He helped the driver and the owner, an old woman, out, as he knew a thing or two about cars. Jean-Pierre was a huge car fan. The woman was on her way to Monaco, but she needed to get her jewelry from Place Vendôme in Paris first. but she could not get there through the riots as her Rolls Royce is too flashy. So Jean Pierre saw his chance to drive a Rolls Royce. So he offered his car to the chauffeur so he could get the jeweler with his car. And meanwhile he could drive the lady in the Rolls Royce to Monaco. After some discussion she agreed. The woman tells her life story on the drive to Monaco. He learns that her name is Chloe. When they arrive, the woman opens a Mouton Rothschild, a $600 bottle of wine. What a sight! Van Rossem is now drinking expensive wine, dressed in ripped jeans, sneakers and a red Che Guevara shirt. During the wait of the return of the chauffeur, Jean Pierre got his own room and he got a taste of the lifestyle of the rich. 3 days pass, but still no news of the chauffeur. Chloe wanted Van Rossem to accompany her to the casino, so she took him shopping. She got him silk shirts, 3 smokings and shoes that cost more than the tires of his car. Chloe took a liking into Jean Pierre. She taught him how to drink wine and made him accustomed to this grand lifestyle. Jean Pierre enjoyed himself and he also took a liking to the maid that served them breakfast each morning. He swore her skirt got shorter each day. The next day it happened to be Jean Pierre's birthday. Chloe invited him to her balcony in the evening, where they enjoyed a fireworks show. When the show was over, she gave him a birthday present, a golden watch. They celebrated with champagne and got really drunk. The next day he woke up drunk, worrying he slept with the old lady. The 18-year-old maid whispered he didn't. He spent the night with her instead, as Chloe asked her to do so. Finally the chauffeur arrived with Jean Pierre's car. The car took a beating through the riots, so the driver had to repair the car first. The old lady finally asked him to spend the night with her on their last evening together. So he did. How could he refuse, after everything she did for him? In the morning she asked, "What's the one thing that you want in your life?" So he jokingly replied, "A Ferrari 275 GTWC. He quietly left her apartment, Monaco, and her life. Several months later, a Ferrari 275 GTWC was delivered to his doorstep. That crazy old lady. So Van Rossem jumped in his Ferrari and drove to Monaco, only to find out that Chloe committed suicide 1 week after he left Monaco. He returned home broken, but the Ferrari was like a gift from heaven. When he was driving the Ferrari, women threw it themselves at him. At a certain point, he grew out of it, as he did not enjoy the fake attention anymore. Several months later, he exploded the Ferrari's engine during a street race. He still not had saved enough money for his journey to the US, so he contacted the Nobel Prize winner Lawrence Klein and asked him if he could not join the classes for free, as he did not have the finances to pay tuition. He did not care if he could not get a diploma, he just wanted the knowledge. Lawrence granted his wish, so Jean Pierre went to the US. Several months into the university, he was already sick of it. But he copied 5 models, he learned what he needed. He could proceed his learning back at home. But before leaving back to Ghent, he met a sculptor, John. Van Rossem told John he never experienced the feeling of falling in love. John replied that brown sugar is the only thing that comes close. He fell in love with Queen Heroin. He sold his golden watch to pay for his addiction. As soon he ran out of money, he called the car shop back in Belgium to sell his broken Ferrari and booked a flight back home. He took that money to rent the downstairs floor of an apartment building. He bought some desks and chairs and started his classes up again, all to pay for his heroin addiction. In the beginning he shot 3 times a day, 1 before class, 1 at noon, and 1 at night. At the end of his addiction, 6 times, nothing compared to Queen Heroin. He created a system to win at the casinos to earn more money, as brown sugar didn't come cheap. Sometimes he won big, sometimes he lost big. He knew he was going to die living this way, but at least he would go out the way he wanted. One day on his drive to the casino of Ostende, he spotted a broke down MG at the side of the road. Once again he offered the Italian looking girl to help, which happened to look like a goddess. This time he could not fix her car, but he offered her a ride to the garage in Ghent. On the drive back to Ghent, the sound in the car was eerily silent. Jean Pierre was attracted to her. "You are the woman of Dali. You mean Gala?" she replied. "Yes. No love is resistant to time." At day 15, love would already start to wilt. He promised himself not to fall in love, as he would not cheat on Queen Heroin. The wind blew up her sleeve, and he could spot the same track marks on her arm as there were on his. She saw, he noticed. They didn't share 10 words, but at that moment he fell in love. She said, "You're a weird bird. I like birds." He pulled the car over under a bridge, and that is the first time Van Rossem at age 27 fell in love. They promised themselves they would not cheat on Queen Heroine for more than 14 days. He called himself Pierre Costal and she went by the name Cleo. She stayed at Jean Pierre's place. 15 days later, her car was still not fixed and they still did not know each other's real names. So he decided to drive her to Venice, Italy. Her father was a Venetian diplomat. The drive took 2 full days, because as soon as the drugs started to wear off, they needed to stop to shoot up again. When he dropped her off at the Venice station, they didn't say a word to each other. He just saw her getting smaller in his rear mirror. The further he got away from her, the more he missed her. He soon ran out of drugs and drove as fast as he could back to his dealer in Ghent. He takes out his wallet to pay his dealer and notices a name card in his wallet with her name on it. He was overwhelmed with joy. He finally knew her name. He decided to live. He didn't want to die anymore. He drove back to Venice. It took another 2 days of driving, and 10 shots later, he finally arrived at the steps of a palazzo. A Portuguese woman opens the door. "I am here for Cleo." In silence, she took him through several salons. A double door opens. 2 men dressed in black and a white coffin await. There lies Cleo. She died of an overdose. He broke down and started crying. He went to the bathroom, strapped his arm off, took out a spoon, loaded his whole supply. He needed to die at that moment. He woke up in a hospital. He returned home, but things only got worse. He was banned in casinos for winning too much money, and the amount of shots just kept increasing, and his work suffered from it. His business went bankrupt. He lost his home and he had to live in a squat house. One morning the police busted in and he was arrested for fraud. The doctors in jail refused to give him methadone. For 4 days straight he was really sick. On the 5th day they took him to see a judge in the Palace of Justice. When the guards let down their guard for a minute, he ran as fast as he could and disappeared in the small streets of Ghent. He got another shot and locked himself up for 3 horrible weeks in a hunting cabin. The way down had stopped. He got clean and he returned to jail and served 4 years. Queen Heroine is dead. So the only thing Van Rossem had in jail was time. His father delivered his books and notes from Philadelphia and the programmable calculator. So that's when he built his first econometric model. A model of the Belgian economy with no less than 330 equations. He sent this model to a student who was willing to run the model on a computer. The model predicted an unemployment rate of 600,000 in 1980. After 3 years and 9 months, Van Rossem was granted a furlough. But he decided not to return to jail and he dived under for months while state security was looking for him. Through his contacts, he got a job working for a magazine, Humo, where he worked as a reporter under a pseudonym, Alba Luce. He got the chance to interview Herman van der Poorten, the Minister of Justice. Van Rossem asked Herman, "Is it possible for someone to get thrown in prison for 4 years for bankruptcy over an amount of 68,000 francs? Herman said, "That's impossible. What about Van Rossem? Oh, but he is a left terrorist. You cannot let such a man roam the streets." So Van Rossem learned that people are only worth the amount of zeros on their bank account. Maybe Herman was right. As Van Rossem was so pissed, he wanted to blow up all law courts. But that had to wait. He first wanted to build an econometric model of the American economy. He knew if he could create that, he would make fortunes.
C'est-à-dire, on entendait parler on allait dans une pièce derrière, il y avait 30 analystes avec des ordinateurs en train de développer des formules pour pouvoir prédire, par exemple, et je me souviens à l'époque, il avait dit, si Kadhafi meurt, je peux déjà prévoir ce qui va se passer sur le stock market. Et on gagne de l'argent là-dessus. Donc c'était ça son plan.
And in a rage, he even thought about using those fortunes to finance a terror movement to avenge his jail time. The first thing he did after leaving prison was going to a bar where he was introduced to Nikki. She was already married at the time and had already a daughter with her current husband. The very night she met Jean Pierre, she left her husband. They didn't have any money, so they even borrowed money from her ex-husband. Within 3 months she was pregnant, so Van Rossem sent a letter to the minister asking to foreclose his last 3 months of jail time, explaining his situation. He signed the letter with his actual address. thinking the minister would agree. 3 days later, his home was raided and he was arrested once again. After sitting out his time, he started a new rehearsal office. Things are heading in the right direction. Baby Nicholas Carls Friedrich was born. He added Carls from Karl Marx and Friedrich from Friedrich Engels as surnames. But as Jean Pierre and Nicky were both huge Formula 1 fans, and more so of Niki Lauda, the child was shortly known as Picky. Life became very less for a short while. He worked on his model for a couple of years, but it was not finished yet. So he opened new rehearsal offices in Leuven and Antwerp. One day he asked his students to bring 100,000 francs to class, so he could show them what they could do with math. As his econometric model was not finished, Jean Pierre gambled. But it worked out. He put 7x the investment. Now the unthinkable happened. The rich father of one of these students heard that story from his son and came to Jean Pierre to invest his money. Jean Pierre explained him that it was pure luck, but the father would not hear it. They would split the earnings above 10% 50-50. Jean Pierre lucked out again by gambling. He made a profit of 25%, so the investment of 100 million francs of the rich father just earned him 7.5 million. Soon other fathers popped up. With the profit, Jean Pierre bought 6 powerful computers and hired experienced econometrists. They all worked on a different part of the American econometric model. They realized a profit of 18%, but in the meantime, their investing capital was raised to $500 million. On one day, a client asked Jean Pierre if he knew how to use duplicate stocks. The client said he had a friend in Chile who could duplicate any European or American stock coupons, printed with the same ink on the same paper. No way to tell if it's fake. Jean Pierre told him it's useless. A coupon could not be paid out twice. If a second customer turned up to the bank, they would start an investigation. So Jean Pierre dismissed this proposal. He forgot about it, until 2 Spaniards knocked on his door with a question to lend 3 billion to them. They wanted to build a hotel complex on San Domingo, but they could not find a bank that would finance it. Then it hit him. If we would give them 3 billion fake stocks, bought in Chile at 1/20th of the price, it would cost them only 150 million. If they would give these stocks in pound to their bank, they would surely get their 3 billion loan. Van Rossem wanted 2 securities. One, they would need to pay off their loans within 5 years. Secondly, he wanted to be sure the duplicators were destroyed at the end. So he studied their credit application and found out that they could not pay off their loan in 5 years. So Jean Pierre passed on the offer. But he learned something valuable that he could use for future projects. He flew to Chile to meet the man and negotiate some terms. The first project that passed his requirements was the startup for a warehouse chain in the US. The need, $100 million. Available, $20 million. So they need a loan of at least $80 million. So they loaned $80 million for 5 years. Chile is prepared to finance $90 million in stock duplicates of 2 German banks. The cost, total amount that need to be pre-financed, $12.7 million. Jean Pierre invited some rich people to his office and guaranteed them 30% profit within 3 months. The project developer needs to pay the bank in Lugano, Switzerland within 3 months. But then he gets $90 million worth in stock duplicates. They can use the stock duplicates and pawn for a loan of at least $80 million. The cost price, 20% of the nominal worth. Profit for the clients, $3.5 million for investment for not even an investment of $12 million. The net profit for Van Rossem, $2.8 million. The investment worked out perfectly. The warehouse chain paid the loan off within 4 years. The fake stock duplicates returned to Lugano, where they were destroyed in the presence of the 2 parties. A victimless crime. Jean Pierre decided to work on 2 separate terrains. The econometric model that he named Moneytron, where he took 10% profit of all stocks, bonds and options that he'd invested for his clients. The second terrain was looking for clients that needed the fake stock duplicate solutions for financing big projects. Jean Pierre was making a lot of money. The rumor got started that he could double or triple your money. As the rumor spread, people flocked to him with bags of cash. Drugs or arms dealers were not welcome. One time he was misamused with a customer he denied to work for 4 times before, but the client did not want to budge. So Van Rossem opened his window on the first floor, took the bags filled with cash and threw them out of the window into the park. He managed between 32 and 38 billion US dollars all by himself. He owned a mega yacht with a crew of 74 that he only used twice. He owned 7 castles, which he had never seen, and even a private jet. He transported his money to Swiss bank accounts by car. He even filled the tires with cash. One time, while driving, one of the tires exploded and the money flew onto the streets.
Didn't get paid the whole year. Not a penny of my contract. And then we got to Japan, to Suzuka. Mr. Van Rossem arrived and I said, "Oh, come and meet me at my hotel, you know." He said, "Oh, well, I got all your salary. I brought it with me." And he paid me everything, my whole salary for the year, in Belgian francs, cash, in Tokyo. And I've literally got 2 laundry bags full of cash.
In total, he financed 6 projects: a ski resort, hotels and chalets. All projects went perfectly. All fake duplicates were destroyed. Jean Pierre earned over $700 million over the 6 projects. But then, The European, a Swiss newspaper, investigated Moneytron and published an article about it. They only knew of the $791 million that Moneytron made legally. They did not know anything about the $700 million he earned on the site with the fake stock duplicates. The only one who knows of absolutely everything is Nikki. Nikki's health became a problem. She suffered from insomnia. She soon discovered if she drank a nightcap before she went to bed, she could sleep. It did not take long before she was drinking during the day. Nikki wants Jean Pierre to stop. She feared for the worst. They agreed Jean Pierre would retire in 1989 and would only write books from then on. They also agreed if Nikki would grab back to the bottle, Jean Pierre would take on a mistress, as a last attempt to make her stop drinking. It did not take long before he found empty bottles of cognac. He took on a mistress named Rashida, but the plan backfired. Nikki drank even more. Jean Pierre fell in love with Rashida, but still loved Nikki. Jean Pierre shared his time between Nikki and Rashida. 3 years later, Jean Pierre gets a call from his 10-year-old son, Picky. "Dad, come home. Mom is dead. She drowned in bath." Jean Pierre and Picky cried in each other's arms, and Rashida took Picky in. Meanwhile, $831 million disappeared from the Moneytron bank account in Switzerland, which is a big problem because the 5th fake duplicate stock project needed $1 billion to make its credit obligations. Jean Pierre hired a specialized financial investigations bureau. They discovered that 2 old employees of Prudential Bache, the Swiss bank, used a proxy to transfer the money over the ocean, helped by 3 employees of UBS. The bureau finds the location of the funds and blocks them. But the funds remained blocked and he needed the money as soon as possible. So he called all project developers from all 5 other projects and explained that he needs $300 million now or they all go to jail. They decided to launch a 7th project, which required 8 billion fake stock duplicates. The cost for these fake stock duplicates, $800 million. To raise the needed capital, they decided to buy a Formula 1 team, Onyx. Jean Pierre hired a team of hostesses. They get schooled in econometrics. Jean Pierre wanted the hostesses to recruit investors into the huge 7th project. The investors were not told about the fake stock duplicates, but only about the econometric model Moneytron. The 12 hostesses were divided in 2 groups. The serious ones, mostly married, that needed to do the PR, and the very attractive ones that needed to pass an HIV test. The Formula 1 Onyx idea worked out. Jean Pierre raised enough capital and ordered the fake duplicates in Chile. Jean Pierre sent the $800 million in payment with insurance. But 1 week later, the bank still not received the fake duplicates. 2 weeks went by, nothing. A month later, he hired a specialized investigations bureau to investigate. They found out that the stock documents were signed off, but were lost in the direction of 2 lawyers in Panama. But they could not find them. So Jean Pierre asked the insurance company to help. Months go by, but the insurance company found out that 4 stocks already were bought in by Deutsche Bank. So the conclusion of Ameritrust, the insurance company, is that the shipped goods are worthless and will not pay out anything. This disaster is quickly turning into a nightmare. It is January 1990, and by the end of June, the investors who financed the $800 million need only their $800 million back, but also 50% profit on that amount. So suddenly, Jean Pierre is in a $1.2 billion hole. His lawyers were also not able to free his legit earned $831 million that were blocked. Jean Pierre calls a meeting with his biggest clients and explains that they are in a hopeless situation. They all agreed that the supplier from Chile was part responsible for the debacle. Because if the supplier had checked all pieces carefully with Bloomberg, they would have known that at least 4 of these stocks already were purchased by Deutsche Bank, and we would have not missed out on insurance money from Ameritrust. So by pressuring the supplier in Chile, the supplier offers to deliver new fake stock duplicates worth of $8 billion, but he still wanted $200 million for it. Money that Jean Pierre does not have, and his customers do not want to invest another dime. So the conclusion is that Jean Pierre needs to continue another year with the Formula 1 team. Jean Pierre promised the financiers that needed $1.2 billion by the end of the year, a deferral of 6 months. 2 of those clients demanded collateral. One wanted his Ferrari F40 and the other wanted his whole Ferrari collection. The sponsor money for the second Formula 1 season was supposed to come from the Rothschilds, who was prepared to invest $20 million. But turns out that the president of the FIA, Jean-Marie Balestre, the company that organizes the Formula 1 World Championship, used to be a Nazi. For the Rothschilds this was not acceptable, as they are Jews, so they pulled out 3 weeks before the start of the new season. Meanwhile, the Moneytron econometric model was not performing good enough at 8.5%, which is less than the usual 10% that gave Jean Pierre his regular profit. Jean Pierre was boxed in a corner, so he gave a press conference leaking the details of Jean-Marie Balestre being an ex-Nazi, and that's why he lost the sponsor contract with the Rothschilds. It was hot news all over the world. Balestre was fired 3 months later, but Jean Pierre did not have any money to finance the Formula 1 team. So he called the big Formula 1 boss Bernie Ecclestone and asked if he could not find a buyer to buy the Yonex team for $10 million. Bernie agreed to sell for a 20% share. He soon sold the team to Monteverdi, a manufacturer of Swiss sports cars. Bernie got $2 million from Monteverdi, but then Monteverdi went bankrupt. Jean Pierre did not get any money at all. Meanwhile, his wedding date with Rashida was already set. So the wedding took place. He rented the steam train, and as custom to the location, Jean Pierre threw 3 bills out of the window, out of the train, to the people spectating. The next day, the newspapers printed, Jean Pierre Van Rossem throws millions out of steam train. To keep the grumbling clients at bay, Jean Pierre sold everything he owned. His houses, his castles, his favorite paintings, his yacht, his leased Falcon 900 private jet. All the money he raised through these sales was not nearly enough to pay for his debt. The press got wind and wanted to know what was going on. Jean Pierre called an emergency meeting with his 12 biggest clients. If they would all give a check of $8 million, they could solve the problem. But at the end of the meeting, there were no checks handed out. The situation is beyond control. So Jean Pierre gave another press conference.
Je hebt goed nieuws en slecht nieuws. Het goed nieuws is, er is een kapitalist minder in de wereld. En ik ben de kapitalist. Dat was het slecht nieuws.
Jean Pierre was the first Belgian to ever reach the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The next day, Jean Pierre was arrested and locked up in jail. Jean Pierre tries to convince the investigators that he created a Ponzi scheme, where he paid one client with the money of another client. Jean Pierre did not have any time to disappear all documents, but the investigators could still not figure it out. Moneytron was declared bankrupt. 40 days later, Jean Pierre was released pre-trial and he moved to Austria with Rashida and Picky. There he works 3 weeks on his book. The trial should flop. It's impossible to figure out how the financing of the mega projects is constructed. As Jean Pierre only flew 1 time to Chile 7 years ago, all payments ran through accounts.
There is no proof he ever was in Lugano. He never flew to Switzerland, never spent a night, and always drove by car.
But as he was facing serious jail time, he founded the political party Rossem, with its goal to make the use of the parliamentary immunity to stay out of prison. Meanwhile, Rashida gets pregnant. 4 days before the elections, they threw him in prison. His imprisonment was huge news in Belgium, and it was covered on all TV and newspapers. On Black Sunday 1991, Van Rossem won the elections, and his party demanded his release. Jean Pierre took his parliamentary oath on the 7th January of 1992. His political career didn't go unnoticed, although by his own saying, he did not accomplish anything in politics. 1992, 23rd of May, Yuri was born. 1993, Van Rossem again courted controversy by shouting during King Albert II's oath ceremony following his succession to the throne. Julien Lahoud was a politician that was accused of shouting Vive la République at the oath ceremony of the previous king, Boudewijn. Julien Lahoud was murdered 1 week later. The political party Rossem collapsed due to an agreement amongst its members and did not contest the next election. In May 1995, he lost his seat in the parliament. 2 days before his trial, Jean Pierre was approached by 2 men which he claimed to be of state security. They threatened Jean Pierre's son, so Jean Pierre would never speak a word about a specific client of him or a Swiss partnership who was member of the royal family. In return, he would only need to serve a third of his sentence. Soon after, the court declared Moneytron as a Ponzi scheme and sentenced him back for 5 years imprisonment. His lawyers appealed, but Jean Pierre was thrown in prison in December 1997. He was released on parole in July 1999. After his jail time, Jean Pierre released some crazy products, like bicycles, cheese, even a driving toilet. He even did PR for a club and made several TV appearances. Meanwhile, his relationship with Rashida worsened, and Rashida finally filed for divorce in 2005. After his political career ended, he earned his money by selling paintings he painted himself. In 2018, on the 9th of November, Jean Pierre Van Rossem was sentenced again to an effective imprisonment of 2 years for money laundering, tax fraud and scam. No way that will ever return back to prison, not a single day. I'd rather drop dead. Jean Pierre Van Rossem died in 2018, the 13th of December.